This lady is a complete operative. There is no way around it. Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White just dropped her official verdict on the WNBA's new era, and she's putting the blame exactly where the league wants it, on the fans. She's out here calling Caitlin Clark fans toxic, while conveniently ignoring the years of league-wide sabotage and player-driven nastiness that created this atmosphere. We're breaking down the full extent of this gaslighting and serving up the facts she intentionally left out. Do you think Stephanie White is genuinely concerned about toxicity, or is she just protecting the WNBA's establishment, like us toxic, for saying the obvious about the sabotage that was going on in this league and how this woman has been targeted since before she even stepped foot in it, all while Stephanie White wants to ignore the facts of what the other players in this league have done, from disrespecting fans, starting fake racial investigations, going all platform like I'm gonna give you the facts that Stephanie White. We have to talk about Stephanie White because she has officially exposed herself. This isn't about coaching. This is about choosing a side in a culture war that the WNBA players and officials started long before they ever wanted to admit Caitlin Clark was the driving force behind their newfound relevance. On Sue Bird's podcast, where she kind of spoke about the toxicity around the league and things that needs to change. Let's get into it. Here says Indiana Fever. Coach Stephanie White shared a strong message about negativity surrounding the WNBA. Here says the WNBA, experiencing a massive growth period over the past couple of years, is an undoubtedly good thing. In fact, there's a case to be made that it could not have come at a better time for the league, given that the Players Association is currently in negotiations with the WNBA League Office for the next collective bargaining agreement. And we see, in one breath, White finally came to grips with the reality that the Indiana Fever is now, undeniably, Caitlin Clark's team. Now, we all know she was forced and pressured into saying that. For the longest time, White was pushing the narrative that Kelsey Mitchell was the main priority, the franchise player, the one they were building around. This was even after Clark was drafted and the entire dynamic of the league shifted. White had repeatedly emphasized that Mitchell was the number one priority, the one who deserves to go through this stage of her Indiana Fever career. You saw the quotes. You saw the emphasis on Mitchell as the main focus of the offseason. And building a relationship with Kelsey, who I also covered when she was playing in college, who's somebody that was really instrumental in everything that we did, it felt like a subtle, calculated attempt to diminish the obvious impact of Clark. But eventually, the tidal wave of Clark mania became too big, and White had to pay lip service to the truth. But now, she's back on her nonsense, using the biggest megaphone she could find, Sue Bird's Bird's Eye View podcast, to blast Clark's fan base. She's calling us toxic. As a Clark fan, and let me be clear, she is my favorite basketball player to watch, male or female, point blank period. I have to call this out as nasty work. She is calling us toxic for simply pointing out the obvious. The sustained, coordinated sabotage against this woman that started before she even officially stepped foot in the professional league. And what exactly is White ignoring while she points her finger at the fans? She's ignoring the very clear, very public facts about what the other players and personnel in this league have done. This isn't about uncontrolled fan behavior on social media. This is about the league and its players contributing to the very toxicity they now condemn. I'm going to give you the receipts that Stephanie White conveniently left out of her discussion with a WNBA legend. We've watched this whole CBA and popularity debacle from start to finish. We had players like Angel Reese talking about how people were only going to be playing in rival leagues like Unrivaled, and that was before the WNBA season even started. The seeds of internal conflict, of us versus them, were planted by the players themselves. It continued all season long with people like Satu Sabi calling out the WNBA for financial issues and players wearing "pay us what you owe us" shirts during the All-Star break. We have seen this institutional mess unfold, and it's driven by player grievances, not fan tweets. basketball hadn't experienced this boom in popularity, which is largely in part to star players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Beckers. I don't know why they keep trying to throw them in it. I get Angel Reese did bring some popularity, Paige Beckers did too, but they don't need to be a part of the Caitlin Clark conversation. Caitlin Clark is the reason for the boom in the WNBA point blank period. It's not because of no Angel Reese. It's not because of no Paige Beckers. They had some of the lowest attendance for their games throughout the entire season. So I don't know why they keep trying to lump them in with Caitlin Clark. But whatever. It's hard to imagine the WNBA players would get vastly increased salaries they're going to receive as part of a ratified CBA, or at least their salaries wouldn't have increased to the same degree. Now, we know they wouldn't be asking for all this money if it wasn't for Caitlin Clark. Now, White and others love to lump Clark in with Angel Reese and Paige Beckers when discussing the boom in popularity. They keep trying to dilute Clark's impact by saying the new attention is largely in part to star players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Beckers. Let's stop that right there. Angel Reese and Paige Beckers are talented, absolutely. But let's be brutally honest. Caitlin Clark is the reason for the boom in the WNBA. Point blank, period. It's not because of Reese. It's not because of Beckers. Those players, even after their college success, had some of the lowest attendance numbers for their games throughout the season, while Clark was selling out every single arena. To try and diminish Clark's singular massive commercial impact by lumping her into a trio is an exercise in intentional political obfuscation. It's an attempt to spread the credit so thinly that the establishment can avoid having to acknowledge the undeniable. One player changed the entire financial landscape. The article White was discussing correctly points out that without this boom, which, let's be real, is the Clark boom. This lady is an ah. This lady is in ah. There's no way around it. In one breath, Stephanie White wants to finally come to grips in terms that the Indiana Fever is Caitlin Clark's team. Now, we all know she was forced and pressured into saying that she had said multiple times, Kelsey Mitchell's the main priority here, yada, yada, yada. But instead of celebrating this financial savior, White wants to focus on the negative byproduct, toxicity. She said on Sue Bird's podcast that she would like to change the toxicity around our league, while admitting it's not really a controllable factor. This is the classic condescending dismissal that places all the blame on the common person, the fan, while shielding the highly paid professionals from any responsibility for their own behavior. Let's talk about the behavior White is choosing to ignore. Let's talk about the players who started the nastiness that the fans are simply reacting to. We had players like Enrique Agawali going on platforms like ESPN, using her national spotlight during Clark's first professional season to call out fans, essentially saying, "We don't want you." That's a player actively pushing away the new audience. Is that fan toxicity, or is that player toxicity? We had Ryan Howard going to the post-game podium and publicly disrespecting fans of Aja Wilson. Fans showed up and cheered for Wilson at an Atlanta Dream home game, and Howard was mad that people were cheering for an opposing player. So, let's get this straight. Hard-working fans who spend their hard-earned money to go to a game can't cheer for who they want. Is cheering for a star player on the road toxic? In the same ridiculous breath, we had Kalia Copper of the Phoenix Mercury getting mad and calling out fans for booing DeWanna Bonner, who had left the Indiana Fever and was returning to Indianapolis as an opposing player. So fans can't cheer for an opposing star, and they can't boo a player who left their team. What exactly can fans do, Stephanie? We have fans who have been called racist, including black fans of Clark being called disgusting, racist terms by other players and commentators. The players come at the fans constantly, but White and the establishment never address the things that these players have done to directly contribute to the negativity. They only want to talk about the toxicity when it benefits their narrative. It took Nafisa Collier getting injured out of the playoffs for the media and coaches to finally start saying something about the dirty, overly physical, and often dangerous play that Clark had endured all season. Clark was the most flagrantly fouled player in the league by a massive margin. That was the players committing those actions. That was the referees allowing that to happen. Don't make that about the fans. Even the Indiana Fever organization contributed to this toxicity. They were lying and hiding injury details about Clark for months, all while continuing to use her to sell tickets. They kept saying she was game to game or day to day when reporters had conflicting, confusing insider reports about what was actually going on with her health. You don't think an organization lying to its massive, brand new fan base contributes to the negative atmosphere? White wants to call out the fans for being toxic because they are the only people finally willing to hold the league and its players accountable. We are simply calling it like we see it. When a player blatantly fouls Clark on the head and the commentary team, or the coach, doesn't call it out, the fans do. When players are clearly jealous and disrespectful, the fans point it out. This isn't toxicity, it's accountability. If Stephanie White genuinely wants to call out the toxicity, then she needs to call out everything across the board. Call out the players who went on platforms to disrespect the fans who fund their paychecks. Call out the players who started fake racial investigations to divert attention from legitimate basketball controversies. Call out the constant, physical targeting of the league's biggest star. Call out the organizations who lied about injury reports. Call out all of it. Don't just try to make it about the fan who is simply pointing out the obvious sabotage that was happening in plain sight. This is why I believe Stephanie White is operating as an op for the WNBA establishment, choosing to scapegoat the fans to protect the players and the league office. She had spent the preseason making a big deal about Kelsey Mitchell being the #1 priority, only to be forced to change her tune. Now she's trying to regain favor with the old guard by slamming the one group that truly supports her team's biggest asset. She's trying to protect the old WNBA culture of gatekeeping and entitlement by attacking the new, passionate audience that is simply demanding better. She is ignoring the undeniable truth about who is responsible for the majority of the league's drama. If you are going to talk about needing change, talk about the need for a longer season, which White correctly did, saying these women deserve the opportunity to have this as their only job #1, and to be able to play a true season. That is a legitimate, important point about player welfare and the need to compete with the overseas calendar. But when you mix a valid structural concern with an invalid, politically motivated attack on your own team's fan base, you lose all credibility. You expose yourself as being more concerned with protecting the established narrative than with actually fixing the problem. White's position is completely contradictory. She can't stand in front of the media and finally admit that Clark is the main priority because of the millions she brings in, and then immediately turn around and slap the very people who created that priority. It's a fundamental failure to understand the business she is in. It's an act of public relations suicide, designed to appease the small, bitter echo chamber of the WNBA old guard, at the expense of the millions of new fans who actually care. And this is exactly why I believe Stephanie White needs to be fired. She has shown a clear misunderstanding of how to manage the biggest star in her sport and a willful blindness to the real sources of the league's negativity. The toxicity she speaks of is simply the collective voice of a massive new audience saying, "We see what you're doing, and we won't allow it to stand." That isn't toxicity, Stephanie. That is accountability. Stephanie White tried to gaslight the biggest fan base in the WNBA, calling them toxic while shielding the players and the league from any blame. The truth is simple. Fans are just reacting to the years of sabotage and disrespect the league enabled. You can't blame the thermometer for the fever. Her lack of honesty is a major issue. Get down in the comments and let me know if you think White is out of line for her comments.